The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that made the walls feel closer. Ryan sat in the kitchen, a mug of coffee cooling in his hands, staring at the ticking clock on the wall. His father, James, had left for his fishing trip early that morning, a cooler full of bait and sandwiches in the truck bed. It was supposed to be a simple, uneventful weekend. But then Elena had asked him to stay. It wasn't the request itself that bothered him. It was how she'd asked. She'd leaned against the porch railing, her smile warm, but her tone carried an undercurrent he couldn't place. "Stay home this weekend, Ryan," she said, her voice light but insistent. "It's just safer." Safer? The word rang in his head. From what? Ryan had hesitated, searching for a polite way to decline. His usual plans involved meeting friends or working at the coffee shop downtown, but he couldn't find the words. Elena had a way of disarming him. Her smile didn't waver, but her eyes held something he didn't understand. "Sure," he said finally, the answer spilling out before he could stop it. Now, hours later, he wondered why he'd agreed. Elena moved through the house with ease, her bare feet padding softly on the hardwood floors. She was humming, a faint, lilting tune that Ryan didn't recognize. He tried not to watch her, but she had a way of commanding attention without trying. She wasn't his mother. James had married her 3 years ago, after meeting her at a charity event. She was younger than James, though she carried herself with a poise that belied her years. Ryan had never known how to act around her, whether to treat her like a peer or the stepmother she technically was. "You're awfully quiet today," Elena said, glancing at him as she poured herself a glass of water. Ryan shrugged, feigning nonchalance. "Just tired?" She murmured, her gaze lingering for a moment too long. "Well, I'm glad you stayed. It's nice having company." Her words were innocuous, but the way she said them wasn't. Ryan shifted in his chair, suddenly restless. The first day passed slowly. Elena seemed content to keep the atmosphere light, asking about Ryan's classes, his friends, his plans for the future. But every now and then, her questions veered into personal territory. "You're a lot like your father, you know," she said that afternoon as they sat on the back porch. Ryan frowned. "How so?" She smiled a little sadly. "You're both so restrained, always thinking, always holding back." He didn't know what to say to that. By evening, the dynamic between them had shifted. They sat in the living room, a movie playing in the background, though neither of them was paying attention. Elena poured herself a glass of wine, then poured one for him without asking. "You're old enough," she said when he hesitated. Ryan took the glass, more out of politeness than desire. They talked about nothing and everything. The conversation flowed easily, but beneath the surface, something was brewing. Elena's laughter lingered a little too long, her eyes holding his a little too intently. It happened the second night. They were in the kitchen again, cleaning up after dinner. Ryan had spent most of the day avoiding her, retreating to his room under the guise of studying. But now, with the house quiet and the space between them small, there was no escape. Elena turned to him, drying her hands on a dish towel. "You don't have to be so distant, you know." "I'm not," he said quickly, though they both knew it wasn't true. She stepped closer, her expression softening. "Ryan, you're not a child anymore. You don't have to act like one." Her words hit harder than he expected. "I'm not acting like a child." "No?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. The space between them was almost non-existent now. Ryan could see the faint freckles on her nose, the way her lips curved into a small, knowing smile, and then she said it. "I think about you more than I should." The air left his lungs. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. "Elena, this isn't wrong," she finished for him, her smile fading. "I know." For a moment, neither of them moved. The silence was deafening. Then, as quickly as the moment had come, she stepped back, her composure snapping into place like a mask. "Forget I said anything," she said, turning away. But Ryan knew he wouldn't. The next morning, Ryan woke to the sound of tires crunching on the driveway. Panic shot through him as he realized the sound could only mean one thing. James was home early. By the time he reached the kitchen, James was already there, unpacking his cooler with a grin. "Trip got cut short," he said cheerfully. "Weather wasn't great, and the fish weren't biting." Elena appeared moments later, her expression as calm as ever. "Welcome back, honey," she said, kissing James on the cheek. Ryan stood frozen, his heart pounding. He couldn't look at her without replaying the night before. How was the weekend? James asked, his gaze flicking between the two of them. Quiet, Ryan said quickly. Nothing much happened. James didn't respond immediately. His eyes lingered on Ryan, then shifted to Elena. Good, he said finally, though his tone carried a subtle edge. Over the next few days, the tension in the house became unbearable. James asked more questions than usual. Small, seemingly innocuous inquiries that felt like tests. What'd you two do while I was gone? Did you finish that book you were reading, Ryan? Did anything unusual happen? Ryan answered as casually as he could, but the weight of his father's gaze was suffocating. Elena, on the other hand, remained composed. She laughed, she cooked, she moved through the house as if nothing had changed. But at night, when the house was quiet, Ryan could feel the unspoken truth pressing down on him. He avoided her as much as possible, but their paths inevitably crossed. Each time, her eyes held a silent warning. Don't let him know.